Hello everyone. Hello everyone. A warm welcome and a good weekend to you guys. So welcome to the Futuristic Friday, and today we'll be talking to Mr. Rohan Desai, and the topic of discussion is digitization of doctor pharmaceutical pharma relationship in post COVID era. Let me allow to introduce myself. So I'm Ashutosh. I'm a principal at Praxis Global Alliance, and I look after the healthcare practice at Praxis. And our guest for the session is Rohan Desai. He is founder of Plexus MD, LinkedIn platform for healthcare community, at which a healthcare community had engaged and sort of shared a lot of knowledge with each other. And Rohan wears dual hat. He is a doctor as well as he also has an MBA degree from IIM Ahmedabad. Welcome Rohan. Welcome to the session.
Hey, thanks, Ashutosh. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So Rohan, I believe you have been working in this space for a long period of time, and it can really benefit some of our listeners who are out there. So let me just start with the first question. So in generally in healthcare, we have seen that COVID has transformed a lot of things in a lot of ways. The way healthcare is delivered. For example, we have seen that teleconsultation, the number of customers on platforms have increased by 2x. The number of doctors have increased by 50%. How has this impacted the doctor and pharmaceutical relationship? Something which has been traditionally done in a way of fit on the ground kind of model. How has it impacted that?
Yeah. So, as you said, healthcare has been sort of at the epicenter of all the disruptions over the last year.
Yeah.
And this session that we are having, in fact, is one of the positive outcomes of the certain shifts in engagements that have happened, because we're far more video driven, far more webinar driven. Uh, I think pharma, uh, when the lockdown came in place in March end, for at least a quarter or more, for 3 to 4 months, it was very, very difficult for the medical representatives to meet doctors and hospitals. And even after that, in fact, that continued for a while. So the social distancing, and then even till date, I don't think the detailing activity has come back to its pre-COVID level.
Hmm.
And at the same time, this was a double whammy. So CMEs and conferences, which used to be a every weekend event or far more frequent, were also immediately cancelled, all of them. And in fact, till date, none of the major conferences have come back. So both these things meant that pharmaceutical companies and doctors, and this is a symbiotic relationship, right? Both look forward to meeting each other.
Right.
We've done a survey in the past called the Doctor 2.0, Digital Doctor 2.0, where it was very fascinating that a lot of doctors actually said that they look forward to meeting representatives because they are a very important source of information and knowledge for them. So now there was a complete void, and we've seen a lot of interesting approaches from various companies, small to big, local to regional. Uh, Webinars obviously have been a major way in which companies are engaging doctors and meeting with them. And uh, uh, besides webinars, there's this whole spectrum of things on the digital side. So everything is digital. Almost everything is digital. The answer to both the social distancing and the events being called off has been digital. But on the digital, there's been a whole spectrum, right from organizing webinars, which may be a local webinar, which is, let's say, attended by 20 doctors or 30 doctors of a particular city, going right up to national and international conferences with up to 10,000, 20,000 doctors in attendance across 3 or 4 days. So that's on one side of the spectrum. But some of the engagements have been much deeper. So you have companies making telemedicine platforms available to doctors. So for their own patients. So if I'm a doctor, if I have my patient base and I'm not able to meet patients in the lockdown, Then there are certain customized telemedicine solutions which are being made available to me so that I can see my patients with ease. There are a lot of platforms which have come up on making knowledge available to doctors. So ebooks and guidelines and journals and so on. So yeah, there's been a very busy sector, digitally engaging doctors over the last year.
Got it. So you talk about digitization. So like we have seen that COVID has sort of accelerated the digitization in the sector, and but what I would like to understand is what has fundamentally changed, which and how long do you think the value proposition of digital going to be there for the pharma companies per se in this context?
So yeah, that's a good question. So nothing fundamentally changed. Nothing made digital a good answer. It's that we were all forced to go digital, and digital had its advantages. So we as Plexus MD, we've been operating since 2014, and pretty much doing the same thing. So helping doctors on our platform. So we have 2.5 lakh doctors who discuss cases, read articles, exchange information, find jobs. So that digital has been there, and it's just that because we had other options, because we had the Salesforce option, or because we had the conference option,
Okay. Yeah.
somewhere digital was always a good to have kind of thing, not the top priority focus area for any organization. And when everything else was off the table, digital became the only option, and people started realizing that this is phenomenally high ROI. So for the amount of investment which goes into, so if you look at a CME which was organized earlier pre-COVID, the cost of organizing one CME would be a lakh and a half lakh rupees,
Wow.
including the cost of the venue, food, getting the speaker, flying the speaker in from a Bombay or a Delhi, and the same cost goes down to something like 10-15,000 rupees on a webinar. So you can do 10 times more activities if you are the medical affairs division of a company, right, in the same budget. So that's as far as the cost is concerned. But what about effectiveness?
Yeah.
What about the retention or the adoption, or what's the experience which doctors are having? I think yeah, initially it was a little different and uncomfortable. It felt like a makeshift arrangement and a temporary arrangement. But like most things COVID related, I think all of us have sort of graduated into thinking that this is going to be the way things will now be. So yeah, we're not saying that every conference forever will be online. But if the mix earlier was 0-100, the mix going forward is not going to be less than 50-50.
Yeah.
A good number of events have gone digital for good, and that is because people are seeing the value of it, the both the ROI as well as the retention. Because uh, digital makes it easy for doctors to drop off if they are not interested in the topic. It makes it easy for people to multitask, and it makes it easy for people to choose. When I go to an event, I have committed. I'm no longer in a position to choose. But here I can choose hall A, hall B, hall C, swap between them, watch something back, take notes while I'm watching it. So I think most of the doctors that we speak with have been very positive about online events.
Got it. Okay. And so you also mentioned a point around pharma companies helping doctors manage their patients and all. And I think many pharma companies have sort of been engaged in launching apps like Drona. So what I would want to understand is that, but on the digital side, patients have also become very digital, right? They also started searching for the causes of their symptoms, sort of trying to do self-diagnose themselves using the same sort of technology. And in our doctor discussions, we have several doctors. We have heard that doctors typically talk about the point that this has sort of become slight of an issue for them, that the patient sort of double guess the diagnosis they are providing. Is there any sort of something which pharma companies are doing? Doctors deal with something like that in terms of let's say patient education or through some other source of information.
Yeah, I think patient education is an area where companies have traditionally focused on as well. So
Hmm.
the age of information and the whole era of patients doing a lot of googling before going to doctors isn't a post-COVID phenomenon. It's actually now at least a decade in the been brewing. So
Right.
over the last decade or so, companies have started investing a lot in patient education. But what's changed in the last year is they are making this available digitally. So what would earlier have been a community program or a patient support program or some leaflets or flyers or actually some meetups have now translated into various digital offerings. So a doctor may have an app on which
Yeah.
a doctor may be able to easily explain how a certain diagnosis was arrived at, how different things in his body are interacting to make this disease what it is, and why the drug, why this stent will work, and what is the difference between three types of stents, for example. So using animations, using some form of gamified material,
Right.
it's now slightly easier to explain to the patient why a certain particular choice might be better in their case. So yeah, there has been some work, but more work is still, I would say, going on between doctor to company more than the patient to company. The focus right now, as I see, between, so of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies, or of the top 15 pharmaceutical companies, at least 9 or 10 have already deployed or are in the process of deploying some form of digital solution for doctors. And the direct to patient solutions are still not that many. I can't probably count more than a couple of major initiatives. So the focus still very much is on the doctor.
Got it. And another thing which sort of basically we talked about is that pharma companies suddenly started becoming very focused on digitalization, and like that's sort of the need of the hour in the last year or so. But so in the whole process, like what kind of challenges are they facing in sort of digitizing this relationship with doctors and the reps in the pharma companies?
Challenges are now beginning to appear because this is a 1 year old cycle, and
Right.
the first 6 months of the cycle were spent in actually figuring out how to respond and acknowledging if this is a permanent shift or if this is going to pass. So I think most implementations, digital implementations out there, are the eldest one would be a 4 month old implementation. So I think challenges are now cropping up. The key challenges which are being noticed. One, there is gradually increasing crowding in certain spaces like telemedicine or doctor-patient apps, or I mean, sorry, company doctor apps or knowledge-oriented apps or platforms. So folks like us, Plexus MD, has already been there, and now there is suddenly three, four other apps which are also there on the platform. So doctors now have more choice, which is a great thing. But the fact is that doctors are not going to have more than a couple of apps for the same use case, right? So that's going to be a challenge, and it is definitely going to become harder and harder as time passes. So the second challenge is the whole concept of neutrality. How will doctors look at XYZ company powered app versus supposedly neutral app? And will they feel that the information here is neutral? Will they feel that there is a hidden agenda? Will they believe when the company promises that the data is safe? So those are also certain challenges which will crop up. And I think the third and a very interesting challenge is going to be how do traditionally sales driven, extensive sales operations and marketing operations metamorphose themselves into digital data and analytics led organizations. And this is not, obviously this is not easy, and this is not easy at the scale of a 10,000 people organization, or a 20,000 people company, or a 5,000, 10,000 crore company. So this is going to be the biggest challenge. Is digital or content in your DNA? And will you be able to hire and retain and give authority to the kind of people and take the kind of calls? The fourth challenge is the whole business model aspect of it. Is this an engagement strategy? Is this a substitute for, let's say, substitute or a complement to your traditional detailing, or are you trying to make money out of this? So is this a business model? Uh,
Hmm.
Eventually, do you want to charge for some of these services like telemedicine or selling drugs or selling diagnostic tests, etc.? So the business model is the fourth one, and these are not uh, as as yet. These are not challenges which have broken the system, but these are just challenges which are appearing, and it will be interesting to see how different companies navigate these, what paths they take.
Got it. So you basically talked about challenges and specifically about the telemedicine. So do you think like are there any sort of regulatory challenges also associated with it? Also, how the regulatory landscape sort of impacting it? Is there any sort of bottleneck or any enabler around it?
So I think March 31st or about last year 2020 was when the official telemedicine guidelines came out,
Yeah.
and they were a very significant moment for the telemedicine
Hmm.
landscape in the country. Not because the guidelines were amazing or were a big problem. I mean, the guidelines are good. There are areas where it can be made better, but the most important thing is that there are guidelines, and it makes telemedicine legal. Prior to that, it was all open to interpretation. A certain court would say that this is not legal. A certain council would say that this is not acceptable. There are still question marks and gray areas around solicitation, for example. So is listing yourself on one of the doctor aggregator platforms okay or not okay? Is it advertising or not advertising? There are still gray areas, but the guidelines have definitely given the whole concept of telemedicine, providing advice on WhatsApp or telephone, and the guidelines are fairly wide. So they include things like WhatsApp and messaging. So it doesn't say it has to be audio or video or things like that. So I think the guidelines have been a great enabler. They have, and they came right in time, and they were in fact accelerated because of COVID and because the government said that for the next 3, 4, 6 months, telemedicine is going to be probably the predominant way in which healthcare will be delivered. So it was a great thing in time. Now we're just hoping that they are rapidly revised with the same urgency with which they were launched, keeping in mind the practical realities. But apart from that, I don't think there are any bottlenecks on the regulatory side.
Got it. Okay. So one more aspect around is this telemedicine part is that there are a lot of telemedicine and teleconsultation players or non-pharmaceutical aggregators out there. How does this sort of focused impetus by pharma companies impact them? Right.
Yeah, I think it's too early to say as to how this will play out, and whether one of them starts dominating or it gets shared. But my given how small telemedicine still is as a part of healthcare delivery, my guess is that this could only be good for the sector, because most new categories, people always welcome competition, because all of
Mhm.
them together help expand the category. If there is a pie, then then a part of the pie makes sense. So I think right now the big advantage to even the incumbents, so the tech platforms who have been offering telemedicine for a long time, is that thanks to all of these advancements happening, the concept of telemedicine is really becoming far more native to everybody, every doctor and every patient. And then, as a next step, different companies will take different positionings and different points of differentiation on pricing, on model, on various things, and try and get a larger pie. But right now, I think it's good for the platform. The same thing with doctor networks. So pre-COVID, there were two or three platforms in India which would help doctors uh, stay updated, discuss cases, take online courses. And post-COVID now, with pharmaceutical companies creating their own platforms, the number of platforms is going to actually triple or quadruple. From three, it's going to get up to 10 or 12. But the long term advantage is to the category, and in the long term, may the best player win. So
Right. So for at least for now, I think it's going to expand the category and the education is going really, the doctor education, especially around digitization, is going to help the sector. Got it.
yeah, there's a lot of push on online medical education.
Right, right. So another thing is that lot of people would be interested in understanding like what are the like most optimal channels to sort of connect with doctors. Like we have seen that there are different mediums and doctors' response rate to them are like very different. So in this digital world, like you would have seen that what kind of channels do doctors respond to better and which are good for engaging them.
So uh, the channels available are emails,
Hmm.
right? You have emails, you have webinars, you have apps. So if the doctor is on one of your platforms,
Hmm.
uh, and WhatsApp is a channel which is available to almost everyone. I think more than the channel, see, all channels are effective because uh, our our uh, our world is online, and that doesn't exclude doctors. So doctors are also online. Doctors also use email. They also use WhatsApp. They also use Facebook, Instagram, and a lot of these platforms. So I think the channels, if you tell me, I think the digital channels are more effective than the offline channels, both from a pure effectiveness perspective as well as from a cost effectiveness perspective. Now, it's really the content and the communication which will actually win the game. So everyone has the same channels. Everyone can write an email or send a WhatsApp. It's really the quality of your content which will eventually and which is leading to a huge rush for good content support platforms. Companies or offerings which have an expertise in creating interesting medical content. So you want it to be scientific and you want it to be interesting. And this genre of content is probably going to be, and not just in text form, not just as an article or a blog, but also as a video, also as a podcast. So I think you'll see more and more of interesting takes on medical content. So, for example, let's say uh, 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 some endocrine society releases guidelines, and typically these guidelines are 100 pages, 200 pages. Can somebody look at them, interpret them, convert them into really interesting read, some sort of a storytelling format, which not only makes it fun to read, but also makes it more absorbable. And so I think you will see a lot of innovation on the content side going forward.
Got it. Something like in shorts for doctors.
In shorts is an example. So in shorts is the innovation there is in being short, obviously.
Right.
But then there are other options also. So you have fin shorts, right? So which is a equivalent in financial news coverage. They take a topic and make it so interesting, which your traditional business papers don't do. So and they've gathered a following of their own. So I think if and medical content is definitely something which can actually be converted into more interesting formats.
Right, right. So another thing is like while we talked about regulations, the government has been very focused in healthcare sector in last couple of years, and one of the major initiatives they're talking about is NDHM, National Digital Health Mission. So like what sort of expectations do you have from ND and from NDHM, and like how is it going to affect the healthcare ecosystem in India?
So NDHM is a very ambitious scheme, and so far so good. So the initial framework, the initial approach and documentation all seems great. The idea of a portable health record, the idea of actually integrating everything into a single number is very promising. It's almost it's touted to be, as disruptive as Aadhaar was, or as UPI was. The only thing is that we'll probably need to be a lot more patient with NDHM than we had to be with the other similar stacks. The reason being that healthcare is super fragmented. You don't have one provider which has a 30% market share in healthcare. So in UPI, you get HDFC Bank and SBI and ICICI on board, and you have a huge market share of
Hmm.
transactions on your side, and even that would have been tough, I'm sure. But here you have at least a couple of 100,000 clinics standalone, 50,000 to 100,000 labs, 30 to 40,000 nursing homes, and we've still not, and the fragment and the organized sector only accounts for, I don't have the exact numbers, but I'm sure less than 10-15% of
Yeah.
delivery in the country, right? So it's going to be a lot of challenge to bring everybody on the net, on that network. And I'm sure what the government will be looking at is creating the right incentives to bring everybody on the platform. Create a system where it's far more beneficial for every provider to be on the platform than to be not on the platform. So reduce the switching cost, make it super easy to integrate with existing local technologies which clinics are using. So make it very easy for people who are not using any technology to jump on board. Make it very easy for
Hmm.
people who are using some local technology to integrate with your system. And I'm sure the architects of that platform would be thinking on all these lines. But yeah, it's very promising, and we should be very optimistic about it. But it's just that I think this is going to call for a lot more patience than the instant success we saw earlier.
Right. So we should basically be patient with the before we realize the true potential of NDHM.
Yeah, that's about what we can do as a consumer. I think what the government will have to do is, the government's work is cut out on making NDHM work, because uh, there are so many different cohorts of patients in India, that having a unified sort of system, the idea itself is fairly overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean there are so many doctors and so many and it's so varied across geography, across regions and different types of service provider. I mean the idea is sort of like very huge.
But the effort has headwinds. Sorry, the effort has tailwinds in the form of, so there is an Aadhaar which is already in place,
Right.
and for everything else now the building block has been there. So if you use Aadhaar to populate your registries and populate, or to do onboarding, things are already simpler. It's also a world which is far more digital than ever before.
Yeah.
So if before COVID, let's say before COVID, you wanted a doctor or a patient to do a video verification, just for example, that would be unimaginable. You wouldn't be able to imagine a crore people or a 10 crore people doing video verifications. But now, with the kind of comfort everybody has with video, the kind of bandwidth available to you, the kind of phones available to you, I think these are enabling factors, and these are what make us optimistic, that eventually this will fall in place.
Right. Hopefully, we are in a very exciting phase for healthcare with so many things sort of moving in different sort of converging and trying to improve the healthcare outcomes for Indian customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the next decade is going to see some massive transformations in healthcare.
Right. So, so Rohan, like you have been in the industry for 6 years, working with the entire healthcare community. Is there anything you feel is sort of missing, which can sort of enable the transformation from the capacity side or from the learning perspective? Like, is there anything which can be sort of provided?
So I think the biggest challenge at a country level has been the distribution of both infrastructure and talent. And while infrastructure is easier to address, talent is harder to address. And so far, telemedicine has been kind of a missed bus, because the first conversations around telemedicine were as early as the year 2000 or even before that. And in 20 years, telemedicine actually, uh, save for a few case studies and a few pockets, it actually couldn't become a sustainable, scalable model. So my hope is that with COVID now, and with a lot of concepts changing in everybody's minds, the the patients would have been thinking differently, the doctors would be thinking differently, government would be thinking differently. So my hope is that telemedicine gets this second chance, and it actually breaks through this second time. And I think the other trend which is likely to which is likely to happen is migration of healthcare to the peripheries. So uh, more and more doctors are likely to start visiting peripheral areas, either on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis or on a daily basis, or permanently relocate. So earlier the patient used to go to the healthcare. What has happened because of COVID is that mass movements are restricted, obviously, and earlier they were restricted by law. Now people are sort of in the mindset of not traveling too much. So what is now happening is that patients are not traveling that much as earlier. The second thing which happened is because of COVID, a lot of public sector and private sector capacity came up in tier one, tier two, tier three, and even more remote places. COVID centers came up, or normal nursing homes converted themselves into COVID centers. And what it meant was there are now at least ICUs or semi ICUs or oxygen support systems where they weren't earlier. So decent capacity started building up beyond the metros, and the metros are not getting enough patient volume. So if you look at any metro city pre-COVID, if you look at a corporate hospital or even a large non-corporate hospital in a metro city, at least 40 to 50% of the patients would be coming from outside the city,
Right.
and all of that starts reducing significantly. So there's more pressure on the hospitals, there's more pressure on the consultants, and the consultants therefore start moving slightly out. I personally know of a few friends who sort of moved out, relocated, or increased the frequency of their visits outside. It remains to be seen if this will solidify as a trend, but uh, probably this might happen because doctors in peripheral areas have now set up nursing homes, and they are now willing to bring a specialist there. They are now even willing to invest in a cath lab, for example.
Right.
So the angioplasties are not going to move out of tier 3 to tier 2 or tier 1. The cardiologist might probably make a visit there.
Right. So, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks a lot to everybody who attended it live.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Same here, Rohan.